today I'm going to talk about the story of collaboration between AI and humans. I think this is a more pertinent story because we tend to listen to a lot of negative connotations to AI in terms of the kind of jobs that it's going to take away. But then there are lots of other stories when it comes to AI that needs to be told. And one such story is the story of collaboration between AI and humans. And I'm going to walk you through something that we have done in the context of Telangana and more specifically in the context of a forest region in the state of Telangana. And obviously anything that is pertinent to something like this, is something you can understand and relate to, and hence I chose this story for today. Now, so before this, obviously there is this context around the kind of economic impact that we will see with AI. Clearly, there is a lot of potential. Everybody understands, and most of you in this room might be professing or utilizing AI as a part of your curriculum, and clearly there's a lot of uptake that we see. And it is important to understand that there is going to be a lot of productivity enhancements, a lot of new types of job roles that are going to come out, and that are going to benefit our humanity. But then it's also important to understand that AI can have a connotation that many of us tend to believe that it exists, but AI is not the end game. And my favorite Dilbert comic tends to highlight some of these instances wherein we tend to trivialize that AI can pretty much do everything, but there has to be a way and a method to which how AI is employed in today's world. Now, in November 2021 or August 2021, we had a chance to meet with the Telangana Forest Department, and as a part of my mandate at NASCOM, which is in partnership with the government of Telangana, our mandate was to understand what are the different problems that are being faced by the state government, and hence how could we solve problems using AI. So we had a meeting with the Telangana Forest Department. This is the Aranya Bhavan, which is in the Khairabad area of the city. And we were asked what could we possibly do. We said, okay, we could use AI to track tigers. And tigers are exotic species, and we said we know use cases elsewhere that we could use to replicate something like that in the context of Telangana. And we were met with the head of the forest department, and who very generously said, have you been to a forest before? And I said, no, I didn't. And then she was very kind enough to say that, why don't you be our guest and come to one of the forest reserves in Telangana, in the northern part of Telangana. And I didn't understand why she said that, but then I took that trip. And anybody, might have heard of this place called Janana. It's very unlikely because not much known about this forest reserve, but for a few of you. But this is technically, if you look at it, it's about a 5 to 6 hour kind of drive from where we are to the northern part of Telangana. And I took this trip along with a couple of my colleagues, thinking about the kind of possibilities AI can have to solve problems in the forest, the kind of problems these officials were facing, and more specifically, trying to solve the use case for tigers. So this video, I'm guessing, won't play, but then obviously there's a lot of wildlife that is there, the cheetah deer, the nilgai deer, different kinds of deers. But to our surprise, we didn't see any tigers. So the divisional forest officer told us the tigers had migrated to the Tadoba forest reserve, which is next door. And this kind of migration tends to happen. So then we realized, okay, our AI-powered use case, which was going to change the world of tigers, is gone. Doesn't exist anymore. So then we try to understand, try to figure out, by talking to them, what sort of problems they were trying to solve. And of course, it's a very beautiful area. Some pictures I tried to collect here and put this together. And when something as beautiful as that is there, what do normal people like you and I do? We take a selfie. It's what I did. It's amazing things how strongly I have also to go there and experience wildlife in its pristine form. Now, while we were around and while we were talking to this divisional officer, we found something very, very interesting. We plug into a computer, we download the pictures, and then we look image after the other. I was like, how many images do you typically gather in a month? And in that particular forest reserve, they captured about 30 to 40,000 images. And I said, what do you do with these images? You go through one after the other. And I said, isn't that repetitive? Isn't that going to be a cognitive overload for somebody who's looking at these pictures? And they said, yes, but then what do we do? So we said, okay, there is clearly a case for computer vision, a case where AI can read these images, and more importantly, can it generate insights, which would be useful for forest officials. What sort of problems are they trying to solve? They're clearly trying to solve problems of poaching, problems in terms of understanding now that the tiger doesn't exist, or tigers don't exist in that forest reserve. There are new apex predators that are roaming around in that area, and hence how do carnivores and herbivores interact in this new food chain. And that is something they want to understand, the interactions between these species. And like I said, they take a lot of time to get these insights developed based on these images. They also do a lot of other recce's. They go into the forest, they look at footprints of different animals, they look at animals from far, and then they make a count of how many animals exist. It's also important for them to know the census, how many animals of a particular species exist. And it's a long process. By the time reality has happened today, their analysis is 5 to 6 or 3 to 5 months later. It's a lot of time. The idea was, can we make it more real time? And we said, let's try to solve this problem. And what we did was we hosted a startup innovation challenge for the forest department. And we said, we also partnered with the industry. Industry came in with their corporate social responsibility funds. And 20 lakh of rupees was made available to the winning startup. Now, this was something which caught attention from 60 startups from around the country, which built proofs of concept. We evaluated those across a 3 to 4 month long process, and then we identified a startup that won this challenge, and we celebrated that occasion. The inputs from the forest department, we took 2 different forest reserves. One in the northern part where I had visited, the Jannaram or the Kaval Tiger Reserve as it's called, and one in Amrabad or the Sri Salem side of Telangana. And there are 2 different forest reserves, and as you can imagine the scale, 4 million images were historically available, and we wanted to use AI to read these images and classify 20 different species. This video also doesn't work, unfortunately, but then what this kind of videos or these insights essentially told the forest officials is how do different kinds of species interact in a geographical setting over a period of time. As you see at the bottom, there is a time slider. So as you move over a period of time, you tend to see where the animals are more located vis-a-vis some of the other areas. And again, 20 different types of species that are there in that region, and then you can sort of co-locate, or overlay them on top of a single map, and then be able to make judgments. There is also human-animal conflict because a whole lot of demarcation of these forests in terms of core regions and the buffer regions was done much after the indigenous tribal communities existed in the forests. And hence, it's very likely that these human-animal conflicts happen. There's a lot of awareness that needs to be done by the forest official, but they don't necessarily know in a structured way. They know by insights based on what sort of conflicts have happened, but then can we preempt regions where humans are more incursing into the forest region, the core regions of the forest. And as a result of that, studies like these have really helped them reduce the incidence of humans into the forest, which will also be covered in the next slide after this. But then, because these are very beautiful locations, a lot of migratory birds come to these forests. And the tourism department, in conjunction with the forest department, wanted to see, is there a potential for wildlife spotting and then wildlife tourism? And hence they wanted to understand the kind of hotspots that exist where this can be taken on. I talked about the reduction in the humans incursing into the core regions of the forest. And this was seen, and the forest officials knew there were reduced incidences because this was historical data. They had a very strong scientific basis to show that all the efforts that the forest department was taking up was helping reduce the number of humans getting into the forest reserve. So, but this was great validation for them, and they could secure a little more funds in order to execute something like this. So what was done for 3 to 5 months was reduced to about 15 days. And 15 days is only because of the time that they take to take the SD card from those cameras and put them into a computer. And that is the only limitation. Otherwise, this is as good as a real time in many ways. So, the government of Telangana sort of submitted this project as a part of multiple occasions, and they got awarded and rewarded for this particular effort. And that also bolstered their confidence, and they said, okay, we're going to use AI for real-time monitoring and for wildlife conservation. This was from earlier this year. And there is a lot of insights that I personally gained. And one of the things that you would have understood from the story is clearly there is AI getting married with a public good or a public problem, and that's where the humans come in. So there's a lot of collaboration that exists between AI and humans. Now, there is also a very strong learning in the context of shared vision. Now, I may come with a vision that I will want to solve a problem of tigers, but that vision is not necessarily shared. Then, on the other side, from an industry standpoint, how can I put my CSR funds to good use, and a use that would actually benefit the society? And having those conversations with the industry, making them realize that their CSR funds can also contribute in projects like this to a startup, which is sitting in Pune or anywhere in the country, wanting to solve problems with AI, but doesn't know how to work with the government. Because working with government can be challenging. It is esoteric in nature, a lot of hurdles exist, but the idea was to be able to sort of create platforms that enable innovation to happen, collaboration to happen, and ultimately the impact needs to be achieved, which is really what we are all after. And that said, the real-time monitoring project which was undertaken, that is a project which has now got through a request for proposal stage, which is in the context of the government. These are tenders that have sort of been floated. Now there are a lot of submissions that have come through. The government has identified a vendor that will actually go and implement AI-enabled cameras in the forest regions for real-time monitoring to happen. So which means now what sort of change has this or impact this project has achieved is a setting where we have the forest not doing much with data. They had a lot of data, but they were not doing much. And on the other hand, now we're talking of real-time monitoring, which means now let's say the tigers decide to make their entrance from Tadava into Jannara. Now there will be a possibility for real-time alerts that can go out to the forest location. There's a possibility for real-time alerts that are possible when humans are getting into the forest area, and there can be announcements made in the neighborhood communities that they need to be more careful, more vigilant, and not really enter into those areas which they should not be. What this also allows for is a situation where the forest department is able to look at scenarios where there is specific bird spotting or wildlife birds which are migratory in nature, and they can start to create a new stream of revenue which perhaps did not exist before. And because of technology, because of AI, they're able to understand the kind of opportunities that exist in that particular context. Now, I'm not saying that AI here is to solve all sorts of problems, but then there are specific areas, specific occasions where AI can be used very, very well. This was just an illustration of a story, but then the story we've been fortunate enough to extend in many other contexts and settings. This was a story from the forest department. On similar lines, we worked with the Municipal Corporation of Hyderabad, especially on problems related to potholes. Can we look at automating, how these potholes are understood, and as a result of that, corrective measures can be taken. We work with the Anti-Narcotics Bureau of the Law Enforcement Department in Telangana, looking at how AI can predict somebody abusing substances, banned substances, in particular. And then a lot of other use cases exist. And what I want to leave all of you with is a very strong message that AI is here to impact a whole lot of us. It is impacting a whole lot of us, but more importantly, there is a very strong sense of collaboration that AI brings to humanity. and it's important that we use it in the right way, in a safe and responsible way. Thank you.